Hello everyone, we are ready for chapter 35. I have a feeling this is a sad one. I can't remember, it might be the next chapter, but we'll see. Oh, of the treasure hunter's tale, I keep on forgetting that bit. Here we go. Freddie was very suspicious. There was something about what had just happened that didn't sit right with him, but he couldn't figure out what it was, so he just walked on with the rest of the group. But he prayed. He told the king of his concerns and asked him for wisdom. Later that day, as the men sat down to have their lunch, Freddie sat down near to Mr. Discover the Truth. "Uncle," he said quietly, those men, did you think they were telling the truth?" "What, Freddie? Oh, the ones we just helped? Why? What makes you think they weren't?" "Well, I was surprised they hadn't been actually hurt by the dragon, and then their armour." "What about it?" asked Mr. Saved by Grace, who was sitting nearby. "Well, it didn't look like ours," said Freddie, with real concern in his voice. "Nor it did," agreed Johnny, who was close enough to hear. "I confess I hadn't noticed," said Mr. Discover the Truth, "but what about what they said about good news?" "Yes, but Uncle," said Freddie, "didn't you notice they said our good news, not the good news?" "To be honest, Freddie, no, but it may just be the way they speak in their parts." "I suppose," said Freddie. "There was just something about them that I wasn't keen on." "Well, they've gone now, so don't worry," said Mr. Saved by Grace. "If they're going to town, we will be able to ask them more when we get back." Freddie sat quietly for a while. He did not like the feeling he had. It was uncomfortable to be the youngest one and seemingly the only one who had had an issue with the men. Johnny waited a few minutes and then asked Freddie to come and help him polish his shield. Freddie thought this a bit odd, but there was something in the way Johnny looked at him when he asked that made him get up and walk with him. Once they were a little way off from the group, Johnny spoke. "Freddie, I think you're right," he said. "There was something about those men that didn't seem right." Freddie was so relieved to have an ally in this. "Oh, I'm so glad you noticed it too," he breathed a sigh of relief. "I wonder whether they were pretending to be attacked," said Johnny thoughtfully. Freddie stared at him. He had not thought about that. "What makes you say that?" he asked. "I'm not sure," said Johnny. "I just have this sense that all was not as it seemed." "Then we shall keep on the alert," said Freddie, "for we must not be deceived." He looked at Johnny. "Thanks for telling me," he said. "I was starting to think no one had noticed, and that was worrying me." "Oh, I didn't want to say anything in front of your uncles," said Johnny, "because I am new to the group and they are all so much more experienced than us." Freddie nodded. It was hard being two of the youngest there, and he thanked the king that he had Johnny to talk to and be young and unsure with him. There was a roar in the distance, and the entire group sprang to their feet. The two boys ran back to join them, and then the hunt began in earnest. The group traversed over boggy fields and steep craggy hills and eventually came to a cliff with a cave in it. Freddie suddenly recognised the cave. They had come at it from a different angle, but it was definitely the cave he had gone into with Ears to Hear and his uncles. Mr. Discover the Truth and Mr. Saved by Grace turned to each other. "Are you thinking what I'm thinking?" they said. "That we've been here before," chimed in Ears to Hear. Freddie was quite pleased that he, too, had been part of that particular adventure and so was able to relate to Johnny and the farmer's son and Shorehope about what they had found. "Well," sighed Mr. Setfree, "we shall have to go in after it," he said. "If we let it go to nest up there, we may never get another chance to slay it, for it will soon be hibernating." The men all agreed to strike while the iron was hot, but the climb was going to be challenging and everyone knew it. They also knew how vulnerable they would be if the dragon attacked them while they were on the climb, so they decided to go round to the other side of the cliff and see if there was a way they could scale down rather than up, as the descent would be quicker. The farmer's son, who was called Master Taste and See That the King is Good, shuddered a little. He was a strong young man with farmer's muscles and brown tanned skin from being out in the fields all day. He was an excellent farmhand, but did not have a head for heights. "I will stay on the ground here if it's all right with you, gents," he said. "I can look after the stuff and be here if the dragon decides to come this way." He did not want to seem a coward, but he also really couldn't face the descent to the cave. The men agreed this would be a good plan and that they should in fact station other men along the route so that the dragon's exit would be totally cut off. Shorehope said he would stay with Taste and See That the King is Good, for which he was very grateful, and then Mr. Saved by Grace said he and Mr. Discover the Truth would stay at the top of the cliff so they would be ready to pull them up if they needed to get out quickly or to attack from above if needed. So that left Ears to Hear, Setfree, Freddie and Johnny. The four young men strode up the cliff, leaving the others at their stations, and came to the crest. "Now comes the tricky bit," whispered Ears to Hear, kneeling down and pulling ropes from his bag. "Have any of you ever abseiled before?" None of the others had, but they were so ready to learn that it didn't take long before they were all ready to go down to the mouth of the cave. "Good hunting?" whispered Setfree. "Once we're down there, there must be hardly any talking." Ears to Hear, who really was very knowledgeable about caves and their dangers, had given everyone a breathing mask as before. "We probably won't be able to hear each other clearly anyway," he said, strapping on his mask. "Right then," said Ears to Hear. "Ready, boys?" he said, turning to Johnny and Freddie and motioning to them. The two young men stuck their thumbs up and grinned. "Then let's go." Ears to Hear motioned, and everyone began the descent. It was a long way down and very tricky. There were a couple of hairy moments where Johnny lost his footing and almost cried out as he smashed into the rock face, but he gritted his teeth, motioned he was okay, and they continued down. It was very difficult to do such a challenging thing and not be able to call out and encourage one another, and Setfree was very grateful that his companions were being so courageous. When they got to the ledge near the mouth of the cave, Freddie motioned to Johnny, "Are you okay?" Johnny shrugged. He was limping slightly, Freddie noticed, and his elbow was badly grazed and his knees were bleeding, where his armour had dented slightly, and Freddie wondered if Johnny should be excused and sent back up to the cliff top for first aid, but he could tell that Johnny was made of sterner stuff. Ears to Hear had noticed Johnny too and motioned to him to see if he was able to carry on. Johnny nodded, and Setfree made a mental note that here was a young man who would be an asset to his dragon hunting team, if they made it out of this next part. The cave walls had burn marks all along them, presumably where the dragon had heated the walls to keep itself warm. There were bones lying all over the floor, and it was difficult for the band to make their way through without making a sound. Freddie noticed that what looked like a dog collar in amongst one pile of bones, and as he looked closer, he saw the 666 mark that the wolves had worn when they attacked him. "So I guess this dragon has been around for a while," thought Freddie to himself as he picked his way along, as that was a good while ago. He then remembered the water and the stalactite and grew puzzled. He got the attention of Ears to Hear and motioned to him to sort of make the point that the dragon was too big to have gone the way they were heading, which was towards the narrow stretch of water with the stalactite, which was now even bigger as it had grown since they were last there. The group stopped and Setfree checked the area. He came back and motioned that the dragon wasn't there, and so they should leave before it returned. But just then there was a loud rumble of what sounded like thunder, and some of the stones from the roof of the cave came crashing down. The whole group froze, their worst fears confirmed. The dragon was now returning, and they were inside its cave, trapped.